week, and every day it really feels like 2017 to me. Why do I say that? Well, because every single day you wake up as a British journalist and you think and you expect and you perhaps even dare to hope that you might be able to focus on something other than what was in Donald Trump's brain, which soon emerged from Donald Trump's brain at some point when you went to sleep overnight. But unfortunately, I think pretty much every day this week so far, from Monday to Wednesday, we have not been able to do anything but avoid that fate. Because Donald Trump has perhaps gone even better than what he'd said earlier in the week. He's gone better than allowing Elon Musk to take over various different bits of the American federal government apparatus. He's gone one better than suggesting that he would impose tariffs on his closest economic neighbours and restructuring the world economic order. He's decided to turn his attention to the Middle East and a plan, a Trump doctrine, a Trump peace plan. And I thought I could do worse this morning by reading you the first few paragraphs of the New York Times reporting on what happened at that press conference with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, overnight, because each paragraph becomes more shocking, more extraordinary, more remarkable than the last. Choose your superlative at will. President Trump, the New York Times writes, declared on Tuesday that the United States should seize control of Gaza and permanently displace the entire Palestinian population of the devastated enclave, one of the most brazen ideas that any American leader has advanced in years. Hosting Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel at the White House, Mr. Trump said that all 2 million Palestinians from Gaza should be moved to countries like Egypt and Jordan because of the devastation wrought by Israel's campaign against Hamas after the terrorist attack of October the 7th, 2023. While the president framed the matter as a humanitarian imperative and an economic development opportunity, he effectively reopened a geopolitical Pandora's box with far-reaching implications for the Middle East. Control over Gaza has been one of the major flashpoints of the Arab-Israeli conflict for decades, and the idea of relocating its Palestinian residents recalls an era where great Western powers redrew the maps of the region and moved around populations without regard to local autonomy. Pandora's box is, I think, exactly the opposite phrase. Let us listen to a clip, an extract of what Trump said standing alongside the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the first foreign leader to visit him as a newly re-elected president, reinstalled at the White House overnight.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area.
What authority would allow you to do that? Are you talking about a permanent occupation there, redevelopment? And Mr. Prime Minister, do you see this idea as a way to expand the boundaries of Israel and to have a longer peace, even though the Israeli people know how important that land is to you and your citizens, just as the space is inherited by the Palestinians as well?
I do see a long-term ownership position, and I see it bringing great stability to that part of the Middle East and maybe the entire Middle East. And everybody I've spoken to, this was not a decision made lightly. Everybody I've spoken to loves the idea of the United States owning that piece of land, developing and creating thousands of jobs with something that will be magnificent in a really magnificent area that nobody would know. Nobody can look because all they see is death and destruction and rubble and demolished buildings falling all over.
I mentioned again tonight our 3 goals, and the third goal is to make sure that Gaza never poses a threat to Israel again. President Trump is taking it to a much higher level. He sees a different future for that piece of land that has been the focus of so much terrorism, so many attacks against us, so many trials and so many tribulations. He has a different idea. And I think it's worth paying attention to this.
That was Donald Trump speaking alongside the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House overnight. This has, make no mistake, sent shockwaves across the Middle East and around the world. Trump has upended single-handedly in the matter of a few sentences many of the assumptions and policy axioms of US foreign policy, which have guided presidents, both Democratic and Republican, for many decades. And though you might say, well, this is what Trump does. Trump often is a maverick. He does things differently. He thinks outside the box. In this case, I have to say, I don't think the box is in the same solar system that President Trump is currently inhabiting. And that all may be true. But it is also true to say that this speaks to, let's leave aside and come back to the actual practicalities of this in a moment and actually why it wouldn't work. One thing I think it does remind us, something I've been saying for a little while, even said a couple of days ago on this show. This reminds us that Trump, too, is operating in a very different psychological mindset to Trump 1. The mindset of Trump in his first presidency, was profoundly isolationist, if anything. He wanted to avoid foreign entanglements wherever he could, in particular in the Middle East, which he saw as expensive, as having the potential to bog America down. He was uninterested in war. In fact, he ran explicitly, as to some extent he even did in this most recent election, as the anti-war candidate, the anti-American imperial candidate. Let us look after ourselves at home, bound by the two great oceans of the Atlantic and the Pacific. That has a great and long-established element. That is a great and long-established element within the American psyche and American political history. Trump, too, is quite different. Trump, too, is no longer isolationist. Quite the contrary. He's expansionist. Let us consider what we're talking about here. Trump is not even saying, and it's not clear what authority he would be acting on here. It certainly wouldn't be under UN authority or anything like that. Certainly not, I think, under the aegis of international law. He is saying that the United States won't just oversee an international force, a coalition acting nominally on behalf of the UN, as America did to some extent, at least they claim to, during the Iraq War. He's saying that the US would unilaterally go into Gaza and own Gaza, that they would redevelop Gaza, that they would force Gazans from their homes because that is in the interest, long-term interest of the Middle East. This is a profoundly expansionist and imperial mindset, quite different to the thing that we saw in Trump's first term, where he largely wanted, in foreign affairs matters, to mind his own business. This is a Trump who is looking for new enemies abroad, for new conquests abroad, for new tasks abroad, because he has so comprehensively vanquished his enemies at home. And Trump's politics is a politics which relies on enemies, foreign and domestic, on aggression, on new conquests, one way or the other. I think Trump wouldn't have thought twice, wouldn't have thought at all about saying something like this. He would have simply looked at the price tag, if nothing else, and found it an appalling prospect. This is a very different Trump. This is a Trump looking for a legacy. And let's turn and think about actually the practicalities of all of this. Now, on the one hand, you can say, and I think it's fair to say, that, well, look, the current situation clearly is not working. We've had year after year after year, decade after decade of Western politicians talking blithely about a Western peace plan or a two-state solution, and it never ever happens. We've allowed Israelis and the Israeli government to continue to settle illegally, making the prospect of a two-state solution ever more remote. You can also say, and I don't say this to back anything that Trump has done or said up at all, you can also say that although this seems extraordinary, if you take a longer historical view, it's certainly true that the borders of the Middle East and the borders of Europe have often been punctuated and marked by big population transfers in order to make nation states work. We saw that with Greece and Turkey at the start of the 20th century. We saw it in extraordinary numbers and to an extraordinary extent after the Second World War. But my word, have we not learnt our lessons from those things? What they are and what they were colonial. They reeked of imperial power, and they caused heartache, despair, and ethnic tension, which in many cases still lingers to this day. And you add on top of that the particular history that the Palestinian people already have with forced relocation, with foreign powers telling them that they can no longer live here, they must live here, ever smaller, ever diminishing enclaves of territory that they must have. They call it the Nakba, in Palestine, the catastrophe when they look back at 1948, the establishment of Israel, and the fact that many of them were forced off their ancestral lands. All of this Trump plan, will be evocative of that catastrophe and will doubtless send shockwaves through the Gazan population and wider Palestine, because they will think that the United States has played its hand and showed which side comprehensively it's on. They will draw the dots, I think, between what has been going on in Israel in terms of the attacks over the last 14 months and now this, and see it as part, whether it is or not, and see it as part of a wider plan to force them from their homes, which it would seem to me likely only has the likelihood of empowering Hamas once again, who will be able to say, we are the last defenders, the last redoubt, the last line in the sand between you and the Americans and the Israelis coming along, invading and forcing you from their homes. Although forcing them where? Forcing them where? Because Trump said overnight that Jordan will take them and that neighboring states will take them, Egypt will take them. Those countries didn't even want to take the Gazans when they were being bombed to bits, let alone now. So the practicalities are obviously in so many ways nonsense, but just because the practicalities are nonsense and only exist in the exigencies of Donald Trump's head does not mean that what he said, the power of his words, does not mean that they will travel. What would happen to Gaza under this plan? Well, this is something that was asked or put to the president by CNN last night in that press conference. Let's listen to what he said.
Please.
Just to follow up on what you were saying about the Gazans leaving Gaza, going to other countries. One, where exactly are you suggesting that they should go? And two, are you saying they should return after it's rebuilt? And if not, who do you envision living there?
I envision a world, people living there, the world's people. I think you'll make that into an international, unbelievable place. I think the potential in the Gaza Strip is unbelievable. And I think the entire world, representatives from all over the world will be there, and they'll live there. Palestinians also. Palestinians will live there. Many people will live there. But they've tried the other, and they've tried it for decades and decades and decades. It's not going to work. It didn't work. It will never work. And you have to learn from history. History has, you just can't let it keep repeating itself. We have an opportunity to do something that could be phenomenal. And I don't want to be cute. I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad. This could be so magnificent. But more importantly than that is the people that have been absolutely destroyed that live there now can live in peace in a much better situation, because they're living in hell. And those people will now be able to live in peace. We'll make sure that it's done world class. It'll be wonderful for the people. Palestinians mostly we're talking about. And I have a feeling that despite them saying no, I have a feeling that the king in Jordan and that the general president, but that the general in Egypt will open their hearts and will give us the kind of land that we need to get this done. And people can live in harmony and in peace.
Donald Trump there suggesting he thinks that Gaza could be the Riviera of the Middle East. I suppose I want to talk to you today, and we're going to be giving this full coverage. Doubtless it's going to come up at PMQs after 12 today, which will of course take live as usual on the show. Keir Starmer will be forced to make it clear what he thinks about this plan, if that's what you can call it. But also want to talk to you about what you think the effect of this will be. What is in Trump's mind? There are people out there who are saying that this is tantamount to ethnic cleansing, or the policy, if it was enacted, would be tantamount to ethnic cleansing. Even if that is the impression, let's leave aside whether or not it would be or not, even if that is the impression that is left, what effect will that have on the extremely fragile, hanging by the most slender of threads, ceasefire which is holding between Hamas and between Israel? And by the way, of course, everyone would recognize Hamas has to be dealt with. Of course they do. I mean, they've been obviously severely militarily degraded over the last 12 months or so, but they have to be dealt with. They cannot be a player in this way in the future of the Middle East. But is this really the way to do it?